You are obviously just a poor rogue cultivator with inferior aptitude, but your dilapidated hut is piled high with top-grade divine talismans and spirit herbs. You even have so many top-grade spirit pills that you use them to feed the dog, all because you hide a worn-out scroll in your bosom. This scroll looks ordinary but possesses a heaven-defying miraculous effect. As long as you write the most basic chi refining mantra on it, you can directly obtain the mid-grade cultivation method, chi gathering technique. Even if you draw a low-grade spirit herb using herbal dregs, it can transform into a complete, supreme-grade 7 immortals herb. However, at the very beginning, you didn't yet know its profound mysteries. You only knew that this scroll left behind by your father before his death was very bizarre. No matter what kind of ink you used to draw on it, it would disappear before long. This left you 100 times puzzled and unable to understand. But your intuition told you that this must certainly be a treasure. Just as you were walking on your way home pondering this, suddenly, you noticed that the door, tight locked when you went out, is now swinging open and shut. There also seems to be a figure sitting in the room. Could it be that a thief broke into your home? You suddenly thought of something. Oh no, that scroll. Your heart tightened, and you hurriedly fetched a wooden club. Then you quickly walked into the courtyard and quietly locked the gate from the outside. How dare you steal from my house? You're asking for a beating. But only when you got closer to your room did you discover a mysterious man in black was actually sitting motionless inside. Noticing that your scroll was lying quietly on the table safe and sound, this finally allowed you to breathe a sigh of relief. Tightening your grip on the wooden club, you were about to rush in. But the next second, your eyes were suddenly flashed by something. In the sleeve of the man in black, a chilling blade was being held. 1 or 2 drops of blood were dripping down the blade onto the ground. The scarlet crimson was blindingly striking. This made you feel a bit terrified inside. You decided to leave quietly and report to the authorities first. Looking at the tightly closed courtyard gate, you regretted it immensely in your heart. Why did you have to lock the gate when you came in just now? Just as your hand touched the latch, a swooshing sound of something piercing the air rang out. A sudden trace of coldness appeared on your neck. Still know to close the door? Not bad. Turn around. A gloomy voice came from the room behind you, making your heart skip a beat. The voice was clearly still some distance away, but this sword was resting steadily against your neck. Could it be that there's more than one person? You complained bitterly in your heart, but as you slowly turned your head, you realized the sword on your neck was being held by no one at all. It was just suspended in thin air against your neck. At this moment, with your lips pale from fright, you could only force a smile. Immortal Master, I am just an ordinary person. The man in black inside the room sneered and said, of course I know. If you were not immortal, you would be dead by now. It turned out that this man in black was known as Old Ghost Cheng. He was a rogue cultivator at the 7th level of chi condensation. He had always been doing the dirty work of murdering and robbing. A month ago, he killed several sect disciples who seemed to have some background. Thus, he had been hunted down ever since. He was severely injured, and all his pills and medicines were basically exhausted. Out of sheer lack of options, he thought of hiding in a mortal town, and your inconspicuous courtyard caught his eye at first glance. So he hid inside. Then, a pitch-black pill appeared in Old Ghost Cheng's hand. It emitted a faint foul stench. He ordered you to swallow it. You were just about to open your mouth to speak, but the long sword on your shoulder moved a bit closer, cutting through some skin. Left with no choice, you could only take the pill from his hand, and swallowed it straight into your stomach with a gulp. Judging from the other party's intention, he definitely kept you around temporarily because you were useful. If you didn't eat this thing, he would probably kill you right now. Seeing you swallow the pill, Old Ghost Cheng could no longer control himself, and directly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. The long sword resting on Suyi's neck also fell to the ground with a clang. Son of a bitch! He is severely injured. This thought had just surfaced in your mind, when a wave of tingling itchiness came from your abdomen. Then it intensified, as if tens of thousands of insects were gnawing at you. It directly made your whole body lose strength and collapse to the ground. The veins on your forehead bulged. Your face turned deathly pale. Old Ghost Cheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and chuckled sinisterly watching you roll on the ground in pain. This is a myriad bug pill. If you do not get the antidote from me within 7 days, you will die without a doubt. But don't worry, I will only stay here for a while. As long as you are obedient and listen to me, I will not kill you. Saying so, Old Ghost Cheng casually grabbed a scroll of painting on the table, wrote something on it using spiritual energy, and then directly threw it to you. Go and buy all the things written on this. If you don't want to die, you better be obedient. At this moment, you stood up quiveringly, and hurriedly picked up the scroll to check it, wanting to memorize what he wrote as soon as possible, because whatever was written on this scroll could not be retained at all, and would soon disappear. The characters written on the plain white scroll emitted a special glow, presumably also a cultivation method. Fleeceflower root, Blatilla striata, cattail pollen, Panax nodo ginseng. Just as you were about to memorize these medicinal herbs, the characters on the scroll suddenly dimmed, and then disappeared one by one. Oh no! Your heart skipped a beat, and your face turned ashen looking at the completely empty scroll. Images already surfaced in your mind of yourself failing to bring back these herbs, and being killed by that man in black. Just when you were in despair, lines of small characters suddenly lit up again on the plain white scroll in front of you. Blood-stanching powder. Refinement method. Unlike what old Ghost Ching wrote, the former just listed the herbs he needed, while what was floating on the scroll now was the very thing these herbs could refine. Is this also a cultivation method? The sudden change made you realize that this scroll left by your father might have some special function. It could even be a treasure that only cultivators could use. Otherwise, how could it be explained that Sui and his father spent 2 generations without ever discovering the function of this scroll? Yet right after this black-clothed cultivator came, the scroll underwent a transformation? But no matter what, the most important thing right now was to gather these herbs. Saving your life is the top priority. As for seeking help, you hadn't thought about it for the time being. Everyone in Daoman City was an ordinary person. Asking ordinary people for help would be completely useless. Fortunately, you had good relationships with people normally. Seeing your bloodless face, the medicine shop owner readily gave you the herbs on credit. After returning inside the house, old Ghost Ching was sitting cross-legged on the bed, with mystic light flowing around his body. A bizarre, pin-shaped magical artifact was hovering in front of him. Then you saw old Ghost Ching force out a drop of lifeblood from between his fingers, and drip it onto this crane ruler pin. Buzz! The pin's body trembled continuously, seemingly extremely resistant to this drop of blood. Discovering its intention to resist, old Ghost Ching snorted coldly and formed hand seals with both hands. Spiritual energy swept in, suppressing the crane ruler pin, forcing it to merge with his lifeblood. After a bout of resistance, the pin-shaped magical artifact finally subsided slowly, and was stored into old Ghost Ching's storage bag. He then took the herbs you bought, and after checking to ensure there was nothing abnormal with them, his expression eased slightly. He promised that as long as you worked well for him, he wouldn't kill you, and might even take you as an attendant in the future, teaching you some cultivation methods. Your heart stirred slightly, and while your thoughts surged, you feigned excitement and said, "Rest assured, immortal master, this lowly one will follow your lead and act entirely at your command." Back down. Old Ghost Ching sneered in his heart, and waved his hand with a straight face, saying, "Little thing, I just need someone right now to temporarily run errands for me. Once my injuries are recovered, how could I possibly spare your little life?" Although you feigned excitement on the surface, you deeply knew that the man in black's words absolutely could not be trusted. If you wanted to survive, it seemed you could only rely on the scroll left by your father. Therefore, you hurriedly returned to the room where paintings and calligraphy were usually piled up, and unrolled that bizarre scroll flat on the table. Again took the brush, dipped it in ink, and on the blank scroll, wrote down the names of those medicinal herbs from before. But after waiting for a moment, the ink gradually disappeared, and no new writing appeared. Recalling the identity of old Ghost Ching as a cultivator, you realized this might be because of spiritual energy, and old Ghost Ching had also just used dripping blood to make the crane ruler pin acknowledge him as its master. Thus, you hastily found a small knife and cut a slit on your index finger, letting fresh blood drip down straight away. Stimulated by the blood, the scroll quivered slightly, and then there was no further activity. There was a reaction, but not intense enough. Could it be that it's not enough? You frowned slightly. After pondering for a while, you picked up the small knife and slashed hard right at the webbing between your thumb and index finger. Then you pressed it directly onto the scroll. Buzz! The scroll began to quiver violently, absorbing your fresh blood madly. The blood in your body surged uncontrollably toward your palm, being absorbed by the scroll. In just a few breaths of time, your lips turned pale, and a sensation of weakness and collapse suddenly struck you. You wanted to pull your palm back, only to find your hand firmly stuck and sucked in by the scroll. You couldn't pull it back no matter what. Finally, 2 quaint little characters surfaced on the plain white scroll. Derivation. This scene made you quite excited, and regardless of having already lost quite a bit of blood in your body, you directly cut open another one of your fingers, and using blood as ink, you began to write the names of those herbs on the scroll. The ancient scroll gave off a bloody scent. The blood characters on it gradually emitted a faint glow, and after they disappeared, another line of ethereal writing appeared once again. Blood-stanching powder. Just as expected, your heart gave a jolt, and you were overjoyed. At this point, you had fully confirmed the true function of this item, but immediately after, your vision was going faintly black. It was a sign of excessive blood loss. Thus, you quickly put away the derivation scroll, found a slightly flat place, lay down, and fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, the room's door was kicked open by old Ghost Ching. "What are you doing hiding here?" Old Ghost Ching said coldly. Then he saw you nestled in the corner, your face bloodless, and your lips bluish. No matter how you looked at it, it seemed like you were on the verge of death. Such weak chi and blood. Could it be that the myriad bug pill has expired? Frowning, old Ghost Ching stepped forward and kicked Sui. You opened your heavy eyelids, only feeling your head dizzy and groggy. "This is a body-strengthening pill. Eating it will replenish some chi and blood." Old Ghost Ching casually threw down a bottle of pills. This pill was used to temper his body before he began cultivation. The chi and blood it supplemented were negligible to him, who had already reached chi condensation. However, it was of great benefit to a mortal. You hid your injured hand behind your back, secretly glanced in the direction of the derivation scroll, and after ensuring old Ghost Ching hadn't noticed, you opened the pill bottle. The pills inside emitted a red glow, vastly different from the pitch-black myriad bug pill from before. Just smelling it made your spirit and energy feel much more comfortable. Thus, you hesitated no further, poured out a pill, and swallowed it. The pill melted as soon as it entered your mouth. A warm current flowed all the way down from your throat cavity, spreading to your limbs and bones. The sense of fatigue generated earlier from excessive blood loss also vanished significantly, and you recovered some strength. You hurriedly climbed up and said respectfully, "Immortal Master, what are your orders? Go prepare something to eat, and bring me another batch of herbs tomorrow." After saying this, old Ghost Ching turned around and left directly. You lowered your head, and only after the other party left did a sharp gleam flash through your eyes. At first, you thought that since the other party was a cultivator, he might not have the desire for a full stomach. If that were the case, it would be very difficult to find an opportunity, since the other party also needs to eat, and additionally wants you to prepare it. Then things would be much easier to handle. Mortal poison. I wonder if you, this immortal master, can withstand it. You calculated secretly in your heart, and then hurriedly stepped out the door. After discovering the secret of the derivation scroll last night, you knew that the scroll could not only replicate the herbs into the refinement method for blood stanching powder. The function of the derivation scroll was to deduce which herbs could refine blood stanching powder, and later, you wrote blood stanching powder on it once again. Yet the derivation scroll deduced a higher tier prescription, blood generating powder. As long as you make good use of this, you will definitely be able to find a chance. You weren't sure if mortal poison could be effective on cultivators, but poisons that had been deduced through the derivation scroll were a different story. Thus, you sought out several different prescriptions, anesthetics, laxatives, and a recipe that caused unbearable heat and restlessness, as well as a recipe for a drug that incited lewd thoughts. Arriving at an abandoned wooden cabin outside the city, you swallowed a body-strengthening pill to replenish your chi and blood, once again cut open your palm, and following the 3 prescriptions, you wrote them down word for word on the derivation scroll, using blood as ink. The derivation scroll faintly flashed with light. The original blood characters disappeared without a trace, and a new line of small spiritual characters gradually emerged. Desert Sistanch, Bazarin, decoct them first. Add toad venom and chwamwa root to make a colorless and odorless medicinal powder. Then trigger it with the scent of cornus and green costus root, which can make a person lose mobility, lose consciousness, cause blood and chi to riot, and overwhelm the 5 internal organs. Seeing that this method was effective, your heart was overjoyed. You hastily memorized this new prescription, and then went to buy the medicinal herbs. You also stole a big rooster from Liurgu, and spent some time preparing the medicine to feed it to the rooster. Cluck! The rooster let out an ear-piercing crow. Then the feathers on its neck stood up, and it fell stiffly to the ground. Its eyes became bloodshot, its claws trembled continuously, and its entire body inexplicably began to swell. Then, with a soft bang of an explosion, the coxcomb exploded directly. Blood oozed all over the rooster, and it lay motionless, looking at the rooster collapsed in a pool of blood. You subconsciously gulped. Your heart pounded wildly. You didn't expect the drug's effect to be this strong. Glancing in the direction of your home, you secretly schemed in your heart about tomorrow's plan. That evening, you were forced to go to the medicine shop again to buy herbs on credit. This time, the medicine shop owner demanded that you leave the title deed to this dilapidated courtyard, with no other options. After pawning the title deed, you returned home. After handing the medicinal herbs to old Ghost Ching, neither of you communicated much. However, old Ghost Ching had clearly lowered his guard against Sui just a tiny bit. Obviously, he did not believe that an ordinary mortal could pose a threat to a cultivator. Until early the next morning, wisps of faint smoke rose within the courtyard. You were starting a fire at the doorway, tearing up paper money and tossing the sheets in one by one. Old Ghost Ching opened the yard's gate, and frowned slightly as he looked at you busying yourself at the front door. What are you doing? Tossing a stack of ordinary paper money into the fire. You trembled all over and said in a low voice, "Forgive me, Immortal Master. Today is the anniversary of my father's death." "So," old Ghost Ching coldly snorted and said, "You'd better not play any tricks." You laughed obsequiously a few times, nodding continuously. Old Ghost Ching scanned the surroundings, and saw piping hot steamed buns laid out on the table. After probing them with spiritual energy, he picked one up and threw it to you. "Heat." "Thank you, Immortal Master." You had anticipated this, and without hesitation, grabbed one side of the bun and took a huge bite. Then you continued to turn back to burn the paper money. Old Ghost Jing watched you coldly from behind, until you finished eating the entire bun. Only then did he pick up a bun and start eating. He just took a gentle, small bite at first, and then waited for another moment, only to chew heartily with peace of mind after finding nothing amiss. While burning paper money, you listened carefully to the sounds coming from behind. Your forehead was already covered in dense, fine sweat. Change to some other fillings tomorrow. Old Ghost Jing wiped his mouth, then walked straight back into the inner room, to continue absorbing spiritual energy and begin healing his injuries. His injuries were already 30% healed. In half a month at most, he would be able to fully recover his peak condition. When that time came, he would kill Sui, and flee toward the northern state. As long as he reached the northern state, he believed he would be truly safe. Sensing the other party entering the room, after waiting for a moment, you let out a deep breath, then pulled out the bottommost few pieces of Joss paper stained with medicinal powder, and put them into the fire. After doing all this, you quietly left the place, ran to a distant haystack and lay down, revealing only a pair of eyes to stare intently into the courtyard. Blue smoke slowly rose. The smell of smoke gradually spread and slowly permeated into the inner room. Old Ghost Jing, cultivating cross-legged, slightly frowned. He suddenly felt a trace of dryness and heat, thinking it was a problem with his injuries. He didn't think much of it, but continued to draw upon his spiritual energy to heal himself. As the blue smoke entered his nose, his body suddenly experienced violent restlessness, like a firework with its fuse lit. His blood flowed backwards. His internal organs throbbed with a dull pain. Scum! Realizing something was wrong, Old Ghost Jing let out an angry roar, hurriedly using spiritual energy to suppress his riding blood. At the same time, fiercely opening his eyes to look outside. He had just carried his sword to the doorway of the inner room, when a surge of powerlessness welled up. With a clang, the longsword fell to the ground. Looking at the empty courtyard, Old Ghost Jing collapsed to the ground, resentment rising in his eyes. He knew he must have been poisoned, but he just couldn't figure out how Sui planted the poison. He had inspected those steamed buns. There were no major problems. Moreover, Sui ate them himself too. Furthermore, a mortal's poison absolutely couldn't make a chi refining stage cultivator like him lose his mobility. Xinyuan Mountain. Old Ghost Jing gritted his teeth and said these three words. Subsequently, his eyes began to blur. His consciousness became somewhat scattered. His skin turned bright red at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if being roasted by fire. Bulging veins expanded. His whole person looked hideous and terrifying, as if he would explode at any moment. Not only was the pain in his five viscera unbearable, Old Ghost Jing also gradually lost control of his body. His entire body went numb and limp. His pair of eyes were already bloodshot. He stared fixedly at the still burning fire pit. He had vaguely guessed where the problem lay. Deeply resentful and unwilling in his heart, he never expected that after escaping the pursuit of so many cultivators, today he would fall into the hands of a mortal. Sui had been staring firmly at the direction of the courtyard from afar. He only felt slightly relieved after realizing the other party hadn't chased him out, until the fire died out and the smell of smoke dissipated completely. Sui waited an entire 2 hours more, before carefully approaching that way. Poking his head out from outside the door to observe, he found Old Ghost Jing lying motionless inside, bleeding from his 7 orifices, eyes tightly closed. Sui stared at the other party's chest and waited for a full 15 minutes. He only slowly approached after finding no trace of breathing. Is he dead? Sui secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva, his body trembling slightly. He had never killed anyone before. This was his first time, even though it was with poison, and wasn't very bloody, but the palpitations in his heart still wouldn't stop for a long time. Just as Sui was somewhat distracted because of his first kill, a flash of light occurred. Old Ghost Jing, lying there, suddenly opened his eyes. The longsword thrust through the air. Scum! Be buried with me! Old Ghost Jing spat fresh blood, while exhausting his last trace of consciousness to manipulate spiritual energy and thrust out this sword. A crisis of death instantly shrouded his heart. Every hair on Sui's body stood on end, but he couldn't make even the slightest reaction. Sui suddenly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His whole person flew backwards, smashing against the courtyard wall. The longsword lost control and fell to the ground, remaining totally motionless just like Old Ghost Jing at this moment, with severe pain in his chest. Sui was drenched in cold sweat all over. He touched the derivation scroll on his chest. Still haven't recovered from that moment of death. That sword strike from Old Ghost Jing just now, had it not pierced his chest, he probably would have been dead already. Fortunately, ever since discovering the secret of the derivation scroll, he had been carrying the derivation scroll close to his body, and today he saved his life because of it. Sui hurriedly rushed up, picked up the longsword, and fiercely threw it outside the wall, then retreated to the back and stared fixedly at Old Ghost Jing. Time slowly passed, but Sui didn't dare to move an inch, looking intently ahead. Noon, dusk. Not until the veil of night gradually enveloped the the area. Did he swallow a mouthful of saliva and probe his way over step by step? After making sure the other party truly had no breath left this time, Sui let out a long sigh of relief while an unstoppable waves of lingering fear washed over him. He hurriedly took out the scroll, and after finding it wasn't damaged, he began to search along old Ghost Zhang's corpse. He was still poisoned by the myriad bug pill. Now a few days had already passed. If he didn't find the antidote, he would really die. Antidote? Where is the antidote? Frantically rummaging through. However, aside from the Chiha pen that old Ghost Zhang refined that day and a yellowed booklet, he found nothing else. No antidote. Sui's heart felt empty. He almost collapsed onto the ground. If there was no antidote, didn't that mean he was doomed to die? Dragging old Ghost Zhang's corpse inside the house, the Chiha pen and that yellow booklet were casually tossed on the table by him. Sui searched again in the inner room where the other party was temporarily staying. Inside and out, over and over again, there was nothing at all. It is said that cultivators all have treasures capable of storing items. It must still be on him. Just as Sui was despairing, he suddenly remembered this piece of information. Ignoring the fact that he had only eaten a single steamed bun all day, he started searching old Ghost Zhang's corpse again. A long time had passed. The other party's corpse had already stiffened. Couple that with bleeding from the 7 orifices and a dark, windy night, Sui actually forgot to be afraid. The desire to survive occupied his thoughts. Finally, he found a delicate silk pouch at old Ghost Zhang's waist. Faintly carved on it were some things he didn't understand. This must be it. Sui was slightly delighted, but found that he couldn't open this pouch no matter what, whether it was tearing at it with brute force, or slashing it with a knife. This pouch didn't open even a single slit. Even when he cut his palm and dripped a lot of blood onto it, it still wouldn't open. My life is over. Letting out a long sigh, Sui's entire body felt weak, his eyes looking somewhat blankly at the night sky where a bright moon hung high, never expecting it would result in such consequences. As things stood now, he couldn't think of any other way to save himself. If he had the recipe for the myriad bug pill, he might have been able to figure out the method of making the antidote relying on the derivation scroll. But now he couldn't even open the pouch where the other party stored his items, let alone the pill recipe, right when all of Sui's hopes were dashed to pieces. And he was unwillingly pondering ways to save himself in his mind. A series of footsteps suddenly came from outside. Old Ghost Zhang, your time of death has arrived. Sui fixed his gaze to look, only to see a young man standing at the courtyard gate, his yellow robe fluttering without wind, a long sword in hand, mysterious light overflowing, the young man's eyes constantly sweeping across the courtyard. He was stunned upon seeing the corpse on the ground, and his gaze finally settled on Sui, whose eyes were gradually brightening. He was an inner sect disciple of Xinyuan Mountain, having chased old Ghost Zhang to this point. After some inquiries, he learned that someone recently went so far as buying healing herbs on credit and mortgaging land deeds, and sensed it was highly likely to be old Ghost Zhang. Thus he rushed straight here without stopping. The faint smell of blood floating in the air further confirmed his guess. Are you also a cultivator? Sui climbed up from the ground, speaking excitedly. The young man didn't answer, staring fixedly at the already stiffened corpse on the ground. Him? You killed him? The young man was somewhat in disbelief, looking hesitantly at the pale-faced Sui. I killed him. Sui nodded repeatedly, then made a motion to kneel and said, Please save me, immortal master. Sui didn't conceal anything, judging from the other party's words upon entering an old Ghost Zhang's situation. This young man was definitely the one chasing to kill old Ghost Zhang. He couldn't open the pouch himself. The other party definitely could. This way, he would be saved. The young man reached out to support Sui. Still somewhat in disbelief, he asked, How did you kill a chi refining cultivator? Sui spoke and recounted the ins and outs of the whole matter. Of course, he hid the matter involving the derivation scroll, only saying that he mixed several kinds of poison together, then relied on the smoke from burning Joss paper to trigger the toxins hidden in the food to kill old Ghost Zhang. So that's how it is. The young man gave Sui a profound look, and nodded, attributing all this to old Ghost Zhang's carelessness and Sui's shrewdness. You said you were poisoned by the myriad bug pill? The young man asked again. The antidote should be inside here. Please save me, immortal master. Sui spoke earnestly, taking out old Ghost Zhang's silk pouch. The young man looked at the pouch with a flash of shrewd light in his eyes and said, Saving you is naturally not hard, but as for this storage bag, the young man's gaze was somewhat meaningful. The myriad bug pill's poison wasn't a particularly difficult poison to cure. Even without the antidote, he could force out the toxins relying solely on his cultivation. But old Ghost Zhang had killed many disciples of various sects. All the items in his storage bag were likely worth a fortune. The young man wasn't an evil cultivator who stopped at no evil, nor did he think of killing Sui and leaving with the storage bag. After all, he was just a mortal who couldn't stir up any waves. waves. Hearing these words, Suyi's heart skipped a beat, understanding what the other party meant. He then spoke without any hesitation. This pouch fundamentally belongs to the immortal master. I only beseech that after the immortal master detoxifies this lowly one, you might teach some cultivation methods, so that this lowly one will have the power to protect himself if encountering similar situations in the future. The young man raised his eyebrows upon hearing the other party's words, yet in his mind, thoughts were surging. He was a chosen talent of the sect. In this generation, only one person was qualified to rival him. After taking old Ghost Zhang's resources, he was going into seclusion to establish his foundation, and the other equally talented chosen one would probably not let him successfully establish his foundation so securely. If he gave Sui an identity and brought him back, might be able to distract the other party's attention. At this thought, this young man smiled faintly and reached his hand toward the top of Sui's head. Sui subconsciously wanted to dodge, but managed to hold back. The other party wouldn't need to go through such trouble if he wanted to kill him. The young man infused a trace of spiritual energy to explore Suyi's body, frowned slightly, then relaxed his brows. Although it's only a mixed spirit root, but based on my status, bringing a handyman disciple back to the sect is still no problem, the young man planned in his mind. At this moment, he laughed out loud. Rest assured, your poison won't be a problem. As for cultivation methods, I'm afraid I don't have time to teach you. Sui felt slightly disappointed, but the other party's next sentence excited him endlessly. I can bring you back to my sect. By then, there will naturally be cultivation methods imparted to you. Are you willing? Willing.